Elon Musk stood at the edge of the ocean and whispered, "God, are you there?" And what happened next changed everything. Was it divine intervention or something deeper within? This moment would ignite a journey that science couldn't explain, and the world would never forget. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The sun hovered low over the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the surface of the ocean. Waves rolled in quietly, kissing the shore in steady rhythm, as if the earth itself were breathing. Elon Musk stood barefoot in the sand, his shoes forgotten behind him. He wore no suit, no polished image, just a simple shirt and silence. The wind moved gently through his hair as he stared into the distance, past the water, past the light, into something only he could see. He had come here alone. Not for publicity, not for strategy, not even for rest. Something deeper had pulled him to this place. For all his accomplishments, space travel, innovation, progress, something inside him still felt unfinished, unanswered. His hands were in his pockets, his eyes scanned the vast, empty sea, and then, almost without realizing it, he whispered the question that had lived quietly in his chest for years. "God, are you there?" There was no thunder, no flashing sky, but something shifted, not around him, but within him. The silence grew thick. The breeze seemed to still. His heart beat louder than the waves. Then, without sound, without shape, he felt the answer. "I am here. I always have been." And Elon didn't move. He simply listened. Elon opened his eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream. But this wasn't sleep, and it wasn't a dream. Something had happened. Something real, something that didn't belong in the world of code, calculations, and data. His breath trembled in his chest. For a man who had always demanded evidence, this moment left him with none. Only a feeling. A certainty that defied logic. He stood there for several more seconds, eyes on the sea, trying to make sense of what he felt. But sense was the wrong tool. This wasn't science. It wasn't theory. It was something older, deeper, alive. Then, slowly, he turned and began walking away from the shoreline. The waves continued to crash behind him unchanged. The sky continued to darken above him. The world remained the same. But he did not. Every step he took felt heavier, not with burden, but with meaning. It was as though something had been planted in him, a seed of awareness, waiting to grow. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel a pull to build or to solve. He felt a pull to listen. And then, quietly, like a whisper pressed into his heart, the words returned. "You are here for a reason." For most of his life, Elon Musk had built his world on the bedrock of reason. Engineering, logic, algorithms, control, these were the tools he trusted. He'd use them to launch rockets, build electric cars, and reshape the future. But even as the world applauded his accomplishments, a quiet unease followed him like a shadow. There were moments, after the launches, after the applause, when the silence crept in. Moments when he stared at the stars, not in celebration, but in questioning. For all the problems he'd solved, there was one he couldn't shake. Why did it still feel like something was missing? Days after the experience at the ocean, he reached out to someone he trusted, a longtime friend, a man of quiet conviction and deep faith. They met in a small, unassuming cafe. No cameras, no entourage, just two men, one question. "Why me?" Elon asked, his voice low. "Why would God speak to someone like me?" The friend didn't flinch. He simply smiled and said, "Because you were listening." The words settled in. Elon sat back, stunned. Could that be it? Had his lifelong restlessness been something deeper than ambition? Something more than the drive to innovate? Maybe it had been hunger, spiritual hunger. He thought of all the moments he had dismissed as mere wandering thoughts, all the quiet urges he'd buried under deadlines and data. Maybe they had been whispers all along, echoes from something or someone who had always been near. As he sipped his coffee and listened to his friend speak gently about faith and meaning, Elon felt something shift again. He wasn't just seeking answers anymore. He was beginning to believe that the questions were the point, and that maybe, just maybe, he had been searching in the right places all along. Elon Musk sat across from his friend, still processing the moment at the ocean. The experience had shaken him, not with fear, but with wonder. Still, he couldn't help questioning it. Maybe it was just a psychological event, Elon said, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. A stress response, a moment of exhaustion or emotion. I mean, how can I be sure it was real? His friend nodded thoughtfully, not rushing to answer. Then, with a calm voice, he asked, "You've searched the stars your whole life. Maybe now it's time to search your soul." Elon looked up. The words were simple, but they hit him harder than he expected. "I've never really done that," he admitted. "I've asked big questions about the universe, what it is, how it began, but not about me, not like this." There was a long pause. "Was it God?" Elon asked at last, "or just a voice I wanted to hear?" His friend smiled gently. "That's not a question I can answer for you. But here's what I believe. Sometimes, when the world is quiet enough, God doesn't shout. He whispers." They began to talk, one idea leading into another. Elon brought up his devotion to science, the observable, the repeatable, the measurable. "I've lived my whole life by what can be proven," he said. "I'm not sure I know how to believe in something I can't test." "But haven't you always believed in what could be?" his friend asked. "You've risked everything on visions no one else could see. You believe in possibilities. Why can't faith be one of them?" Elon thought about that. He had walked countless investors through blueprints and projections that no one understood until they saw a rocket land upright. His whole life had been about seeing what wasn't visible yet. "But prayer?" he asked. "That's always felt foreign to me." His friend didn't laugh. He simply nodded. "You don't have to pray like anyone else. Just start with silence, listening, not to get answers, just to be present." It was a strange idea. Stranger still that Elon found himself drawn to it. That night, he didn't say anything out loud. He just sat on the floor of his study, lights off, city lights blinking outside the window. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He waited. He didn't expect words. He didn't expect anything. And yet, the stillness felt different than before. The next morning, he did it again. 10 minutes, then 15, then 20. Not to ask for anything, not to analyze or solve, but to listen, quietly. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but something told him that wasn't the point. For the first time in his life, Elon Musk wasn't looking for a breakthrough. He was looking for peace. And though he didn't know it yet, he had already begun to find it. The quiet mornings became part of Elon Musk's rhythm. No calendar reminders, no scheduled alarms, just an internal pull, guiding him to those still moments. And then, one morning, it happened again. The feeling returned, not as a voice he could hear, but as something deeper, a knowing, a presence, a whisper not in the air, but in the soul. "You have been given everything, for a purpose." Elon opened his eyes. The words lingered, not spoken, not imagined, but somehow real. His chest tightened. He sat motionless for several minutes, heart pounding. A purpose? His mind snapped back to everything he had accomplished. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, Starlink. He had pushed boundaries others hadn't dared to approach. He'd dedicated his life to innovation, to moving humanity forward. Wasn't that purpose? And yet the question wouldn't let him go. If I've already given my life to something meaningful, why does this feel so different? The tension sat heavy in his chest, stretching between his logical brain and his now stirred heart. He had always been certain of his mission, to solve problems, to fix what others ignored. But now that certainty was beginning to crack, revealing something far more mysterious underneath. He tried to dismiss the feeling. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe just exhaustion. But he knew better. This wasn't about ego or fatigue. It was about something he couldn't name, something that refused to be ignored. Days passed. The whisper didn't return right away, but the weight of its message stayed with him. He began to wonder what purpose really meant. Was it creating machines, leading teams, launching rockets? Or was it something smaller, something deeper? He revisited the ocean, hoping lightning might strike twice. It didn't. The waves moved with their same rhythmic grace, the wind brushing against his face like a memory. But the stillness inside him had shifted. He began asking questions he never thought he'd ask. What if all my achievements were just the beginning? What if my greatest work wasn't mechanical, but spiritual? What if I'd been building in the wrong direction? The doubts multiplied. The questions wouldn't stop. And one night, they overwhelmed him. He sat alone in his home office, lights off, blinds drawn. A single desk lamp illuminated the room. His shoulders hunched forward, hands clasped tightly. He tried to form a thought, but nothing came. Only confusion, tension, weight. Then, with no warning, tears welled in his eyes. He wasn't used to crying, not like this, not from a place this deep. His voice cracked as he whispered aloud, "What do you want from me?" No answer came, only silence. But even in that silence, he felt seen. The tears didn't stop. They came harder now. Years of pressure, doubt, fear, and pride finally breaking through the walls he had built. He wasn't crying because he was weak. He was crying because, for once, he wasn't pretending to be strong. When the tears slowed, he wiped his face, breathing deeply. He didn't have answers. He didn't even have clarity. But he had a question, and somehow in that moment, it was enough. Because questions, real questions, open doors. And for Elon, a door had just begun to open. The evening was cool and quiet as Elon Musk stepped out of his building for a walk. He hadn't planned to go anywhere specific, he just needed to move, to breathe. The stillness in his heart had shifted again, not in fear or uncertainty, but in yearning. He needed clarity, not from a screen, a lab, or a boardroom, but from life itself. As he turned the corner near a quiet park bench, he saw her. A woman sat alone, shoulders hunched, hands trembling slightly. Her clothes were thin and worn. Her face carried exhaustion far deeper than just the day's troubles. Elon hesitated, then walked closer, unsure why, but unable to keep walking. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were tired, but not empty. "I've lost everything," she whispered. Her words cut through him like a blade. They weren't just hers. They were his. Spoken years ago, though never out loud, in the silence of his own soul, in the darkness behind success, he'd whispered those very words. And now, hearing them again, from someone else's lips, something inside him stirred. He didn't hesitate. He sat beside her, not as a billionaire, not as a public figure, but as a man who understood what it felt like to be lost. "You're not alone," he said. "I'm here, right now." She looked at him with disbelief, then curiosity. "Why would you help me?" Elon didn't have a clever answer, only the truth. "Because I believe everything happens for a reason, and maybe I was meant to sit here beside you tonight." In that moment, something clicked. A piece of the puzzle fell into place, not with grand revelations or divine thunder, but with stillness and kindness. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about ambition. It was about presence, service, love. That night, back at home, Elon found a book his friend had given him weeks earlier, one he hadn't yet touched. Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. He opened it, unsure of what he was looking for, but the words pulled him in. Page after page he read of faith not as superstition, but as a rational foundation for hope. He read about pride, doubt, morality, and the idea that human hearts are made for something more, something eternal. The sentences hit like waves, gentle, unrelenting. In God you come up against something which is in every respect immeasurably superior to yourself, Lewis had written. Unless you know God as that, and therefore know yourself as nothing in comparison, you do not know God at all. Elon stopped reading. He looked out the window. The stars shone faintly above the city. He thought of all he had built, the rockets, the satellites, the code, the companies, the acclaim. And for the first time, he didn't see it as power. He saw it as responsibility. All of it, his intellect, his platform, his wealth, none of it was truly his. It had been given, entrusted. And now, he understood what the whisper had meant. You have been given everything, for a purpose. That purpose wasn't to control. It was to serve. To build not for applause, but for people. To give, not to gain. To love. The path forward wasn't fully clear, but one thing was, he would never see his influence the same way again. Elon sat in his study one evening, the stars visible beyond the glass walls. The lights were dimmed, and the usual hum of emails and alerts had been silenced. This was a space he'd grown used to, thinking, planning, innovating. But now, it felt different. He wasn't building a launch plan or drafting the future of AI. Tonight, he was reflecting on the quiet change happening inside him. Anna, his longtime assistant and confidant, entered the room carrying a tablet, but paused when she saw his expression. "Elon," she asked gently, "everything okay?" He nodded slowly, gesturing for her to sit. "Anna, I need to tell you something. And it might sound strange." She lowered the tablet and leaned forward, listening intently. "I believe God spoke to me," he said, his voice steady but quiet. Not in a dramatic way, not with thunder or visions, but in a whisper. A presence I couldn't ignore, and I think I was chosen to hear that message so I could share it. Anna blinked. She knew Elon as a man of reason and clarity. Yet there was something deeply grounded in his voice, something real. "I believe you," she said softly. He looked relieved, almost humbled. "It wasn't about making me feel important," Elon continued. "If anything, it made me feel small, but in the best way. It reminded me that I'm not the center of everything. I'm just a man who's been given more than most, and now I know why." He stood, walked to his desk, and picked up a folded sheet of paper. "I've started writing something. Not a press release, not a statement for shareholders. A letter to the world." Anna reached for it, but he held it a moment longer before handing it over. "It's not polished, it's not strategic, but it's true." The letter began with these words: "To those who followed my work, my life, my story, I want to share the part I never understood until now." As Anna read, her eyes welled up. Elon watched her. "God didn't speak to me because I earned it, or because I'm special. He spoke to me because I was finally still enough to hear." He paused, and his voice didn't call me to build more. It called me to be more, to be useful, to love, to serve, to give. That's the wisdom I've found. That's the message I need to share." Anna nodded, holding the letter close. "Then let's share it, Elon. The world needs to hear this." The auditorium was full, but the energy was different. This wasn't a product launch. There was no countdown clock, no flashy prototype under wraps. Just a simple stage, a microphone, and Elon Musk, standing not as a tech giant, but as a man transformed. He looked out across the quiet crowd, his face calm, his tone thoughtful. "I've spent most of my life chasing what the world calls success," he began. "Innovation, achievement, recognition. I thought those things would bring fulfillment, and for a while they did." He paused, taking a breath. But something was always missing. Even after the biggest breakthroughs, I would find myself staring at the stars, still asking the same question. Why? The audience leaned in. One evening, standing alone by the ocean, I whispered into the wind, "God, are you there?" His voice trembled slightly, and I didn't hear a voice out loud, but I felt something. A whisper, not from the air, but from within. It said, "I am here. I always have been." A hushed silence blanketed the room. "Since that night, everything changed," Elon continued. "Not because I stopped being who I am, but because I started becoming who I was meant to be." He looked down, then back at the crowd. "I'm here to say this clearly. We are all here for something greater than ourselves. No title, no amount of money, no invention can replace what only purpose can give you. And that purpose comes from listening, from being still enough to hear the whisper." Cameras flashed, reporters watched, stunned. This wasn't the Elon Musk they expected. "I'm not walking away from innovation," he clarified, "but the drive behind my work is no longer ego or ambition. It's gratitude, it's faith. I want my life to serve, not just succeed." He glanced to the side of the stage, where Anna stood with quiet pride. "God didn't choose me because I was good or deserving. He reached me because I was searching, and I believe He's whispering to all of us. The question is, are we listening?" There were tears in the audience now. People clutched hands. A few bowed their heads. When I look back, I see now that everything, every success, every failure, was preparing me for this moment. And today, I want to encourage you, listen for that voice. The one that speaks when the world is quiet. The one that tells you, you were made for more. The auditorium erupted, not with applause at first, but with stillness, with reflection. Then, slowly, a standing ovation began, rippling through the room like a wave. And just like that, the message spread. Clips from his speech flooded social media. News outlets ran the story with headlines like "Elon Musk shares encounter with God" and "The billionaire who found faith." But the true power of the moment wasn't in the headlines. It was in the hearts of those who heard it. Strangers shared their own moments of stillness. Parents talked to their children about faith. Teachers brought up the idea of purpose in class. People of every background, religious or not, began to ask, "What am I really here for?" Elon's story went viral, not because he had built a rocket, but because he had opened his heart. He didn't expect universal agreement, but he wasn't looking for that. He had found peace, and that peace became his message. Not everyone believed, but everyone paused, and in a noisy world, even a moment of quiet reflection is a miracle. Elon had lived his life trying to change the world with technology. Now he was changing it with truth. The night was quiet. Elon Musk stood alone beneath the stars, the sky above him stretching endlessly, just as it always had. But this time, something inside him had shifted. He wasn't looking for scientific explanations or trying to calculate distances between galaxies. He was simply still. "Listen, I used to ask the universe how it worked," he said softly. "Now I ask why I'm here." The wind whispered around him, gentle and calm. He didn't need thunder or lightning to feel something sacred. In that quiet moment, the question wasn't a cry for answers. It was an invitation to keep going. He turned slowly and looked directly into the camera. "If you're still searching, don't stop. That voice you're hoping to hear, it's waiting. Not with noise, but with peace. Not with pressure, but with purpose." His words lingered in the air like a promise. Because in a world that celebrates noise, Elon had found strength in stillness. In a life filled with accomplishments, he had found meaning in surrender. And in the greatest mystery of all, he had found God. If this inspiring story touched your heart, subscribe now for more powerful stories about faith, purpose, and the quiet voice that can change everything.